This week in Hey the Parents, we're talking all about diving into the world of college fears, major changes, and life lessons, all from the perspective of a recent grad. It's a mix of reflection, advice, and maybe a few cringeworthy moments. We'll talk about what's really worth stressing over in college. Hint, it's not your dorm decor. Why it's okay to change your major, or 3 times, and how to eat like the locals just might be the highlight of your college years. And maybe we'll remind parents to take a deep breath the next time their kids announce they're switching from pre-med to interpretive dance. Because in Hey the Parents, it's an honest discussion about raising kids. I'm Michael Height.
I'm Sarah D.
And I'm Mike Levine.
Kids don't come with a handbook, so we need your help.
Where do babies come from?
Where do you think they come from?
Is this a kissing book?
Mama! Mama!
What?
Hi.
I learned it by watching you. There are no rules in this house. Not like a regular mom. I'm a cool mom.
We sent them to the best boarding schools. We hired the best nannies. We did everything right.
Hey, Mom! The meatloaf!
No drinking, no drugs, no kissing, no tattoos, no piercings, no ritual animal slaughters of any kind.
Together, we can rule the galaxy as father and son.
This is Hey Other Parents, an honest, messy, imperfect show for raising kids.
All right, so it's us again. Well, it's me again. So, all right, so here's the deal. Mike Levine is good to go. Family is flu-free. He is doing okay. He's going to be popping on the next episode. Great news about Sarah. Her son is doing a little bit better. She's going to return soon. So we have a really kind of a fun episode this week. So this week I have a special guest, my friend Carolyn. We are going to go from the polar opposite of last week, where we had Joe on the podcast, and he was talking about announcing and becoming a new dad. What's on the other end, you say? Going off to college. So this episode is going to be all about talking about some ideas about going to college, what that's like, getting in, maybe even trying to stay in, because that's probably the hardest part, and all of the things that maybe we've lost touch with because it's been a bit. This is kind of fun for those of you at home who have kids that are maybe in high school, getting closer to the point where they start thinking about where they want to go and start putting those things in their resume and all that good stuff as they get the transcript ready to send off and wait for those envelopes to arrive, or those digital letters of envelopes. I don't know. But we're going to find out today because Carolyn is going to kind of give us some insight into some of her recent experiences. Maybe I'll have a flashback moments of mine at Clemson, and we'll see just where this takes us. So I'm going to switch over now to the interview, and we will see you on the other side. So maybe on the other side isn't exactly what we were going for. All right, Carolyn, what is up? Welcome aboard. Welcome. Hello.
Hello.
So we had a couple technical issues, which is life, which is podcastery, and we are now trying something out where Carolyn is on her. We're connecting through her phone, and we're doing it through the majestical Roadcaster. So I think this is working. This is good, but I have to imagine in my head what Carolyn is, how she's reacting in her face right now, because this is audio. This is old school. It's happening.
The good news is we eat lunch together every day, so you know my reactions to things.
Perfect. So I have to this is it. We're kind of getting into lunch mode right now. All right. So this is exciting because Carolyn, you I know that you didn't just graduate college, but I think this is kind of cool because you kind of still have some connections to college because of playing volleyball and all that good stuff. And I thought today would be kind of fun to get into some of the the things that I guess probably puts people on edge, and maybe some of the things that make people nervous about maybe going away or applying, and the fear of what that's like, or maybe how things are going to be different. And then of course any sort of sagely advice that you have and things of that stuff. So all right, so shall we? I guess we'll jump right in, right? So yeah. Before you okay, so let's tell us a little bit so you did you kind of know what you want to do, know where you want to go, or you kind of one of those students that were kind of try to go to try a few different colleges or put in for a few different places and see kind of where things would take you, or did you kind of have an idea where you had originally wanted to go?
I was one of those students who had absolutely no idea where I wanted to go, and I think I put in about 13 applications, which was ridiculous for a senior student to do, but I had no idea. I tried some, I tried some New York schools, I tried some far schools, and then because I also had volleyball on the table, that allowed me to look at a lot of different schools for a different reason. Um, but yeah, it was a fun experience. If I were to do it again, I still think I would have chose the University of Delaware. I ended up falling in love with it when I visited, so I think that's the most important part is, you might love a school and be stuck on a school since you were a freshman in high school, but once you visit, it's a completely different experience.
That's so funny because like, did you go like with family, with friends? Like when you went to go see it, like how do you remember how you went about seeing it and all that good stuff?
Yeah, so I always went with my mom because
Okay.
my dad didn't go to college. So I was one of those kids that I had a parent who went and I had a parent who didn't go.
Okay.
So the best thing my mom did through the whole process was she was completely honest with me and she asked me, you know, what I wanted. She was like, "Do you want a school that has, a party life? Do you want um a big sports school? Do you want this? Do you want that?" And it made the process a lot easier. And then she always had stressed for herself that she didn't go away to college.
Oh, I see.
So that was a big thing for her, but my dad wanted me to stay close as a dad of one daughter would always want.
Oh, no kidding.
So she forced me to look away.
So she's like, yeah, that's cool. You're going somewhere. You're going somewhere else.
She was like, "That's cool, but even if you go to Old Westbury, which is 10, 15 minutes away, you're going to dorm for the first year because you're going to learn what it's like to live alone."
That's amazing. That's it. Like that's a pretty forward thinking perspective.
Yeah, it is. And I think that's something that, especially if it's your first kid going to college or your first and only kid going to college, it's definitely something that parents should think about because when I look back on it, if she was more of a strict parent or like closed off about it and didn't ask me the question she did, I probably would have went a different route and wouldn't have been as happy as I was.
It's funny because like you speak about like the influence of parents. I feel like for me growing up, like my parents both started out local, and then my parents both ended up going away. My dad went to Tulane for grad school. My mom was in North Carolina. So like in my head, it just sounded like I had to go away in a sense. Like that was just like what we did. But I remember like a freak out moment before I was set to go away. I'm like, what am I doing? Like, do I really want to be doing this? And it did take take a little while to settle in, but like everything sounded great in theory, and then I was ready to go, and I was like, oof, was this a good idea? And obviously I was happy, as time went on. But it's weird how you feel like you have your mind made up, and sometimes I think like it's people kind of have this thing where they sort of like feel like once they made up their mind, they have to go with it regardless of how they're feeling differently or whatever in the moment. And they just kind of get on like, sort of like autopilot. But it's kind of cool that you were influential. Your mom was so influential in that way.
Yeah, I mean, Delaware was the last school I visited. And I remember my mom made me take the tour by myself.
Mm.
And that was the first time I ever did that, which was really fun. And I remember texting her like halfway through the tour. And I was like, "So how do we feel about me going to the University of Delaware for the next 4 years?" And she was so happy because she also loved the school.
Oh, cool.
And then obviously part of my influence was sports. So like I ended up joining the team and like they were giving me money, but she also made sure to tell me like, hate to say it, but you're not going to make any professional money playing volleyball. It's not one of those sports. So she was like, "If that's the only reason you're choosing a school, I want you to like look at the whole picture."
That's pretty powerful because like, do you feel like you sort of like accepted that going in, or like, did that sort of like slip out of your mind about this idea of like where volleyball might take you? Like, did you agree with her at the time, or was it kind of like you just didn't want to hear that?
Oh no, I totally 100% agreed with her
You did,
because
yeah.
I knew going into it, like I wasn't one of the top 100 players in the country, and then I wasn't going to some, Big Ten school where I was going to be broadcasted on TV. I knew it was going to be more of like, you're doing this because you like it, and it's something that's going to make the 4 years more enjoyable. And if you can get some money on the way, it would be great. But they also sat me down and had a big talk about like, if you do not get money, we're not going to let this influence your decision as much as what schools are giving you money.
Right. That seems
Because
reasonable, right?
it's reasonable. I mean, they were like, we're not going to pay for you to go to Penn State and be like a red-shirted freshman and not play and pay $70K for 4 years.
Right.
Just so you can wear a jersey.
And I guess like the idea is like, you know, with many places, I guess like going to a university or a school that's in state as a public university is usually always like the most affordable option. And then depending on, you know, even if like a school gives money to get the price of the school closer to what it might cost you to go in state, that's probably pretty preferable in many cases, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's definitely preferable. And then it's also the matter of, even though you're in state, you can still go super far away.
That's a good point too, right? It doesn't have to be like
I mean,
10
at least
miles.
New
It could be
York.
like, yeah, true. Go as far as the Great Lakes. Yeah.
If you're in Delaware, there was only 2 colleges, and I think they were like an hour away from each other. But
yeah, that's true. Do you feel like when you were at that mindset, like of going away and like choosing the college, did it change like as time went on? Like, do you think you would have? I guess you'd mentioned it. Like, I guess it kind of, you felt like it was the right place for you. Like, you felt it was good. Do you remember like what drew you in when you saw it?
it was, for me, the campus. So because it was for sports, I got to go alone, and then I got to go again on like a regular tour. So when I first went and saw the facility that I was going to play in, it was amazing. And I loved the coach, and I loved the team that was there at the time. But then the campus, it's this really old, small towny feel.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone will always say, and this is like the statement that is said about University of Delaware, like, it's a bigger school, but the campus makes it feel small.
Okay. And is the
And that's
size?
kinda what,
Yeah, I was gonna say this number of students or the size, was it pretty big from what you remember, or is it a pretty manageable size? Like, did you feel like it could have been huge by the numbers, or was it sort of like the right size for you?
it definitely had more students than you thought it did. I mean, if you're not counting grad school students, it's probably like a smaller big school.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but once you got involved with things, it was like, and this isn't even in big schools, like, you get on the same route that you take the class like every Monday,
Yes.
Wednesday, Friday, and you see the same people, and you realize you're like, oh, this school isn't that big. And then you leave and you're like, no, that's just because I had a schedule and those people had the same schedule as me, and I was passing them at the same time every day.
Oh my God, that is so funny. You just totally brought me back when we went to see University of Georgia. It's like huge, it's a big school. And my mom, my parents were like asking questions of her. And mom was like I think she alluded to like the size of the school, or like, I don't know. I think she, in her mind, I think my mom already made up that she didn't like it because of the size. So she was like, what about the size of the school, whatever it was. And the guy basically gave the same answer you did. He's like, oh, well, like, like you sometimes pass by the same people on your way to class. I was like, wow. But that's like anything else, I guess, right?
It's like anything else. You get used to it.
Yeah. Did you know, like, if you, like, in the back of your mind when you were first starting, did you have this idea in your head that you wanted to like the idea of going to more of like a small town versus a city versus like whatever? Like, did you kind of have your mind made up that one of the, like a certain version of like how like the setting would be right for you?
Yeah, so I knew I didn't want to go to anything that was a city landscape,
Mm-hmm.
because the city did and still terrifies me. So it wasn't for me. And then it honestly made it feel like I was at home in a way, because their town part is just like a strip of stores. It's not really like a town.
Mm-hmm.
And that always made me think of Long Island, because so many of our towns have like that Main Street strip, which is what it was called. It was called Main Street, where you go to all the restaurants, there's like all the bars, there's the shops. And then when I moved off campus, you got to like drive around a little bit more into like Newark, Delaware, and like go grocery shopping and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But for freshman year, which was like, I think the scariest year for everybody, it was nice that there was just one space where like the CVS was, the food mart was, and like that's all you had to do, and everything was walking distance.
That's a really good thing to kind of point out to people. I mean, the idea of, just the idea of like getting around, like, sometimes some schools require like hopping on like 17 different buses to get to where you need to get to. And that's like overwhelming or tiring, or the idea of doing that in cold or hot weather or whatever else doesn't exactly seem as appealing when you actually have to do it. So walkable and having a small town and being able to bump into people, that's something that I think a lot of people might like. I do, that's why I liked when we went to Clemson. I think it was like, it's a big, big sports school and everything else, but the actual town itself, I'm sure it's gotten bigger now, but I feel like there was like one big strip, and that was like kind of the main idea. It sounds kind of similar in that way.
Yeah, and I feel like after a while, every single school is going to become smaller to you, but it's nice when you're a freshman to not have to worry about, like, I can't imagine if I had to be like, oh, I have to get the bus for my 8 a.m. and go here. Like, we did have buses. Every school has buses or transportation, but you didn't necessarily have to use it.
Right.
The only time I ever had to use it was when I was a freshman and I had, like, sadly, 5 a.m. lift. And I had to go all the way to North College, which I could have walked if I wanted, just no one would ever walk. I took the bus, but my freshman year roommate was also on the team because that's usually how they do it. So we both woke up at the same time. We both took the bus. So I always had this like partner in crime to like rely on. So it was fine.
That's kind of nice because that makes it, obviously having the buddy system is always a good thing. Do you remember like when you were, if you remember back at all, like did you have anything that was like you had fears or things that you were nervous about that maybe seem like, I don't know, kind of silly now at the time that maybe you were nervous about going away?
I had no big fears that I can remember going in, but I remember it was like the second day of classes, and I had just walked through all my classes and I had gone home, and I think my roommate went out to go see like a friend from home because I didn't really have any friends that came to Delaware with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember freaking out and calling my mom, hysterically crying, saying I wanted to come home.
Because you were like all by yourself.
I was all by myself for the first time because for the first couple days with orientation and everything, you're go, go, go. You're with your floor from your dorm, and there's all these different things planned for you. So you don't really have time to think about like, oh, I'm homesick.
Right.
And then the second I was alone, I was like, oh my God, I've never, even though I'm an only child, I've never been alone before. I'm very close with my parents. They were always home with me. And I was like, oh my God, like, I don't know if this is the right decision. And then my mom didn't tell me, but eventually she told me, I think when I came home for Thanksgiving, that she freaked out, obviously, when I called her crying and was telling my dad, oh, should we go pick her up? What should we do?
Yeah.
And then the next day, she calls me and check on me. And I'm like, oh, I can't talk. I'm on my friend's boat.
Oh, so she tried to like almost like wean you off of like.
Yeah. And meanwhile, I was perfectly fine within the next 6 hours.
Right. But it is, I think you brought up something, see, like, that's why I'm loving that we're talking right now. Like, I would not have even remembered that or even like felt that emotion of like, once the party cruise ends and you're there to actually be there, you have to like live there and experience it. And that's a weird transition.
Yeah. To wake up and realize you're in like a 4x4 cube with another person, and you can't just go home and have your own space or really like just do the things that you would normally do when you were by yourself at home. It freaked me out.
Did you have like the thing where maybe some of the people that like you went to high school with or friends sort of were in closer proximity to each other than you in their college experiences? Like maybe they went to New York schools and they were close to each other and you felt like sort of like isolated from that?
No, my whole friend group kind of went all over.
Oh, they did. Okay.
Like one of my friends, they did. They went to Notre Dame. One went to Boston, and then a couple stayed home, but they still dormed. So I kind of would scroll through social media and like see everything they were doing, and then I was having very similar experiences to them.
Okay.
every now and then my friends who were at like the big sports schools would post that, like a Notre Dame football game or like a Penn State, football game. And I would get a little jealous because Delaware doesn't have that.
Okay.
And that's one of the regrets I have is not taking into consideration that I am a sports enthusiast and I probably would have liked to go to more games than we had in Delaware because we just weren't a sports fan school.
Right.
But at the same time, I still had great experiences where I was, so it's not really one of the big regrets that I have.
Like when you left high school, did you think you were sort of like in the right mind frame and right mindset to do like the coursework or to kind of get ready for the different type of schooling that college was like?
I thought I was, but I wasn't at all.
Is that like me? I don't think I knew how to study until I got to college, and that was quite a time to learn.
That's the big thing, actually working in the middle things that like accelerated classes, like their kid just doesn't know how to study. It's not that they're not doing well, it's just that they just don't know how to study for themselves. And when I got to college, that was it. I was always a high achieving student. I never really had to study. As long as I paid attention in school, I was fine. And now I'm in lecture halls with 150 people in my gen ed classes, and it's all on you.
So that like I'm hearing that was a bit of a shift.
It was a big shift. There's no study guides anymore, and it's very independent. And like while I thought I was super independent, coming to college, I realized I wasn't. And my mom would call me and be like, okay, so you have to go to, the TA hours, you have to go to like the extra help hours, like you have to do this by yourself now. And I was like, oh, this is the adult part that I wasn't looking forward to.
It's funny because I remember back, parents, I guess I am one too. But I feel like my dad, I remember my dad, like, there's always those lines you remember they tell you and you're like, oh, all right. Like you don't necessarily like agree at the time, but like you kind of hear those voices over and over again. I guess like if you get to the point where like you hear your parents' voices, they've probably said it 6,000 times and they were effective in telling you what they wanted to tell you. But my dad used to always say like the hardest part of college is not getting in, it's staying in, which I think is absolutely true because like you to get into college is like, it's hard to get in. So like once you're in, you're basically we're competing to get into that spot, and the people that are around you are like the same, if not higher standing academics. So like the idea of just memorizing stuff, from class and spitting it back out in tests, I think that's gone for most people. And I don't know about you, but like I didn't know that I had to go to the bookstore, buy a book, bring it home, and like sit there and like go through every chapter and like go through the outlines and write in the books. And it's a very bizarre experience.
Oh yeah, I thought I could still fly through everything with minimal effort, which couldn't happen anymore. And especially if you're one of those people like me who are there on scholarship, you have to maintain your GPA.
Oh, there's no choice. Yeah.
There's no choice. My parents told me like if you lose it, like you're coming home. That was it. Because we simply couldn't afford to send me there anymore.
And the amount of effort and like everything that went up to that point, like the fear of losing that must have been intense.
Yeah, it definitely was. And it was even for the friends that I made and the friends that I had back home that were just there on academic things instead of sports like me, because I had both. It's a lot to put on. You're 18 years old when you first go, and you've never been on your own and really had to study before. And you really saw the difference between people who were like me, who were deciding like, I have to go to the library and lock myself in a private study room and get this done. And then you saw your other floor mates from your dorm who were out partying, and you're like, okay, maybe I'm making the right choice right now. But then there's also weighing the balance. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I still went out. I ended up joining a sorority, but there were the days that I did have to lock myself in my room or go to the library and really hunker down and make sure I got my work done.
Can we speak? Let's speak to that for a moment. I think like that's like probably like a pretty important thing, like the balance, right? Like the idea that you know, as a kid, you're 18, like this is like you have like 4 years or whatever the plan is to like kind of like take it all in, and it's like a big it's like a big old buffet, and like you can't just party, you can't just sit in all the time, you got to want to experience all the things and kind of meet people and go out and do stuff. And then you had this extra layer of like waking up super early, working out, being part of a team. It's almost like the people that get sports scholarships. It's almost like you have it's almost like they're betting against you. Like it's hard, like it's even harder to maintain that than it really should be.
Yeah, it's definitely a different lifestyle, I'd say, than any of the other normal, for lack of a better word, students.
Yeah.
It's definitely something to take into consideration, especially if this is why when I was deciding what I wanted to do, my parents told me, well, if you're only going to get like D2 offers, if you don't get a lot of money, we're not going to do it because your academics come first. And a lot of my teammates throughout the 4 years, even me, ended up leaving the team, not even just for academic reasons, but social reasons. Like, I want to have 1 year where I can do whatever I want, where I can sleep in if I want. And then there was also my friends that were just normal, no extracurricular type of things that still felt like, am I missing out because I'm staying in one day?
Yeah.
Oh, everybody on the floor is going out. Should I go out? But I have a test tomorrow. And then you start to weigh it out like, okay, but my test isn't until 3 o'clock. So like, I can
Right.
go out for a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And you're like, well, let's see if I get an hour and a half of sleep. How about
And I think that was one of my biggest fears.
I was gonna
Oh,
say
sorry.
like the fear of like that, like finding that balance, right? Like, poof.
Yeah, and that's something I struggled with, I think, all the way up until senior year was, am I missing out?
Did you remember watching
Because,
any friends or any people like that you were close with, like sort of mess it all up or like drop out or had a hard time maintaining?
oh yeah, there was a girl on my floor who was going out every single night and then came to me and asked me to tutor her because she was flunking general chem and was going to lose her scholarship. And then she was a year younger than me, but she ended up deciding to go home and stay home during COVID, which was completely different than anything that's ever really going to
Oh
happen
man,
to
really? Yes.
people. Yeah.
So what year was that
Yeah,
for
it's
you?
a layer that we forgot.
Holy
For
schmoly.
me, I remember sitting on the green, we used to call it, the like nice little garden space, and getting the text and looking at all my friends that were like just sitting around me hanging out and getting the text saying, you have 48 hours to move out and go home because
No
COVID is a
way.
pandemic.
Holy moly. What year
And
was that for you?
that was my junior year.
Oh, so this was 2 years in, ready for like the part of college where like it sort of opens
It
up
gets
and you gotta get
easy.
into your major and you're kind of really getting to like get into things. And then it's 40,
And
48 hours and get out.
48 hours and get out, which was absolutely insane thinking back to it, especially that my dad did it alone because my mom passed away my freshman year of college, that he had to come up 3 hours away out of nowhere. Like, I can't imagine if I was upstate New York and, a longer drive away.
Wow. So you holy schmolies, man. You crank things up to like a whole different level in the 4 years that you were away.
Yeah, and I think it happening my junior year was definitely not detrimental, but it definitely made a change in certain people. For me, because of everything that happened with my mom, I already felt extremely independent, but I feel like junior year is where most people tend to move off campus and become really independent.
Mm-hmm.
And when we came back for senior year, it felt like a lot of people kind of went wild, which rightfully so. I mean, some people decided to stay home for the full year. I ended up having to come back my spring and live in this weird, like, COVID dorm landscape.
That must have been so surreal.
It was surreal because it started off on Zoom, which because you can observe so much.
Oh my gosh.
And because
Cameras off.
every
And,
child,
yeah.
absolutely staring at blank screens. And they said I could do that for a little bit. And again, like, I have to give it to them. They were running with something that the college has never seen before. And then halfway through, they're like, no, the public schools are going back in Delaware, so you have to come back too. And I was like, okay, well, no one else is coming back.
Wow. Did like different majors return at different times? Like, did you guys go back and other people didn't?
So everyone had the option to come back.
Okay.
But part of the campus was back by the spring semester. And that was because it was kind of winding down. We had to get weekly testing if you lived on campus, which you're bound to show up positive at least once.
How did they do that? They basically passed out tests in the dorm room, like underneath your door. Like, how did that even go?
No, we had it was usually, again, like on the green or like outside the library, like a very common space. And they actually had the nursing program, because we have an amazing 5-year nursing program, run it. And it was like stations. It felt so.
This sounds like a dystopian future. This sounds like you're like in the Hunger Games or something. That is insane.
No, it did. I remember I had to show my student ID, scan it, and then I would go through it and they'd be like, you're going to spit in this, and then you're going to mix this. And then they'd like stamp or like rescan my ID to say that I did it. And then in 24 hours, you would get a text that says like, you tested negative. And then I remember the one time I got the text, you tested positive, and then came the extremely long text of like, you cannot do this, you cannot do this, your ID is invalid at all.
No way.
Libraries,
they shut you down?
Yeah, they shut you down.
Oh, wow.
And if you lived in a dorm at the time, which I ended up moving out, your RA would like check that you were there. Like, you couldn't sneak out. It was like being under lockdown.
And then what about food? Like, how did they feed the people that were? Yeah, I'm so curious. This is like this is eye-opening.
You got like a little food delivery, and then there was also, because I had an issue where one of my roommates tested positive, and my other roommate didn't trust her to like isolate herself, which was a valid reason. Like, she wasn't going to isolate herself. And there were these isolation dorms that you could say you needed to go to. And that was if you either lived on campus and didn't have a place to isolate, or if you lived in a dorm and they needed to move you out because you had a roommate, they would put you in, it felt like, she told me, like one of those little like padded cells, like you were in a room.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
In this random dorm all the way on North Campus, which is as far as you can get for us. And it had a bathroom and you could not leave.
So you have like a duffel bag and you would just go there until your time was up?
You would go there until your time was up and they would bring you food.
Oh, that is so strange.
It's actually like jail.
Wow. What a way to to experience that time in your life. That is nuts.
Yeah, and the weird thing too is like, I was back, and if you came back, you were still online for the most part.
Oh, that is wild. So like everyone was still pretty much in their dorm room just on their computer?
Yeah, and it took away that, like, oh, I get to have my lecture hall seat friend. It's like, no, I'm this little cube on the screen every day. Hey.
Wow. And then like because people were getting tested every week, did people still kind of socialize and hang out?
Yeah, we weren't supposed to at all. I mean, it was all very like hush hush. Like, it felt like we were in like the prohibition almost. Like,
wow.
Like, it really turned into like this weird after nightlife.
Right, like almost like
going out.
like a speakeasy, but you're not. It's in the year 2000 something.
No, it was. It was absolutely insane looking back on it. And I haven't thought about this in a very long time, but
yeah, really.
It was like these dages that were like spread across 4 yards, connecting backyards, and it was fine.
Because you were really just, I mean, it didn't matter if you were there or somewhere else anyway, because people were going to be You're in college, you're in college. So that's kind of how it's going to go. Did you feel like your perspective changed dramatically, like from the time, I'm sure your perspective changes from the time you were like in high school to the time you went to college, but just from the experience of going through, freshman and sophomore year to the craziness of junior and senior year, that must have been just really strange. You said you became a lot more independent.
Yeah, 100%.
Did you have moments where you were questioning if like you were on like the right path? Like if you felt like, I guess like you must have felt at a certain point like the major was correct and you felt like you were doing what you wanted to do, and it sort of kind of sinked in.
Yeah, I mean, I changed my major once, and probably the best thing I ever did was make sure that I chose kind of a broad major that was still in something I'm interested in,
Mm-hmm.
because I had friends that tried to go from something like biology to marketing, and it's like, okay, but now it's been a year or 2 years or however long you were into that first major, none of those classes are transferable.
Right. You have like a series of elective credits now. That's nothing useful. Yeah.
That's nothing useful. So I was happy with my decision of starting broad and then really fine tuning what I wanted to do. Um, in a way, I almost went undecided and then just took the classes that I liked. But towards the end of my freshman year, I remember talking to my dad and being like, "Hey, I know you and mom really, really wanted me to become a physician's assistant,
Right.
but I'm just not thinking it's the path for me. I think I'm going to change my mind." And I remember being so nervous about asking my dad, because you think it's like they're so proud of you. They think you're going to make so much money. This is
Right.
what they're paying for school for. And now I want to change my mind. Oh, he was like, "If that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do." He's like, "I just want you to be happy."
You're probably like, but this is what I want to do. Oh, you're agreeing with me. Okay.
Yeah, you're agreeing with me. Okay. And I feel like it's also definitely because like I knew exactly what I wanted to do at that point. Um, but also he didn't go to college. So like he didn't really have any background to say like, "Oh, you can't like change." He was just like, "I'm guessing this is what people do. They change their mind." He was like, "I changed careers like 9 times before I landed where I landed."
So I guess it sort of like seems that even though he didn't go to college, it seems like some of his thought process was pretty well aligned with yours.
Yeah, pretty well aligned. And thinking about this now, it's kind of crazy to think. And I remember thinking this when I was changing my major, that at 18, when you write down or apply for the major that you want in college, they're assuming you know exactly what you want to do for the rest of your life,
Which is wild.
which is wild to put that on an 18-year-old. I mean, I know so many people that are on their second careers already.
And like that's something that if we could get into that maybe for a second, like the sometimes when you apply to college, if you are choosing a specific area, that could make it like harder or easier maybe to get into a program or not, depending on what you say you want to do, right?
Yeah, especially if you're one of those people that's applying for one of the 5-year programs. Like I know there's PA
Right.
programs, there's nursing programs. You're locked into that. And then that program itself has its own very high expectations that they expect of you.
Or if you don't apply into the program and then you're you're hoping that you get into that program, if you go away to the college and you don't get into the program, then you're also in kind of a situation.
Yeah, too. And even if you realize second you're like, "Oh, I want to join this program," it's like, "Well, we don't really want to take you anymore." Or,
Like, what am I doing
"Well,
here?
that's great." It's like, "Well, that's great, but you have to go to school for an extra 2 years because you're starting at year 1. You're
Right.
starting over."
And that's cheap. That's a good thing,
Like,
right? Jeez.
that's cheap. That's so cheap.
Yeah.
Um, but this connects back to what you said before with, people who didn't make it through or people who leave or go back. This is a big reason why, and this is a big reason, honestly, why I saw a lot of my friends leave, especially during COVID, was they realized what they were doing wasn't for them, and they're like, "I'm not going to waste the money and sit here and twiddle my thumbs and hope it all works out. I'm going to go home, take a breather, and come back, which in itself is a pretty smart thing to do as long as you eventually make your way back. Like at 18, it's really hard to know what you want to do for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So if you choose something and you don't like it and you want to start over, you can do that.
That's pretty wild because I think most grown-ups, or at least like our parents, you know, even thinking of like me, thinking of my parents, like the idea of saying like I need a break or I want to change or or I'm going for pre-med. They're like, what's pre-med? I feel like there's like so many different like there's like the you know, there's the things that it's almost like having faith in an 18-year-old. You sort of have to have some faith in them. And not like and also be there for them too. You can't like just give it, it's not all or nothing, but it seems like it's a balance. It seems like putting a little faith in your kids is probably, it has to happen at some point. It might as well happen before they get there, you know?
It might as well happen before they get there. Yeah. And it's like, it's a give and take. It's like, okay, if you're partying all the time and you're failing all your classes, maybe it's not your major, maybe it's just you. And then there's the one where it's, okay, you hate everything you're doing in your major. Yeah, maybe we need a little bit of a change. But also sometimes that party kid gets taken out of school and goes back and changes everything up. So I think it's really dependent on a case by case basis, which is really hard because every parent wants like kind of like a checklist of how to best support your kid. And every 18-year-old in college wants to just do it the right way and go straight through and have the perfect experience. But obviously life isn't like that, with getting things thrown at you that college is going to throw at you.
Especially especially the experiences that you had. Jeez. And then when you think about it, like, I'm curious, like, you know, I think everyone's kind of in this boat too of, do you think that there was any advice that you received as a teenager, like kind of going to this, that you thought was like completely wrong at like, or something that was, that you were like, nope, this is like the polar opposite of what my experience was, or like that advice didn't really help me?
Well, I always think back to when you're in high school and your teachers tell you, you can never email a college professor like this. Meanwhile, I would email my college professor at some point, like, hey, Jim, not going to be in class today. And they'd be like, that's fine.
Right. Oh, like the mentality of like, oh, they're not going to put up with this in high school. Oh, they're not going to put up with this in college. And it's like different than you expected.
Oh, it's such a lie, because 90% of my professors didn't even know who I was because I was in giant lecture halls.
Right. And that's a huge difference too, right? Like that's something that maybe people don't, you know, take the time to kind of express, of this idea of like, not in a bad way, but like, you're just, no offense, you're not special, kid. Not in a room, 200 people, you know, that's just, you know, just exist, get your job done, you know?
No, and that's the funniest thing that I think about is like, there were aspects, like there were still the people that were grasping at like I was popular in high school, I want to be popular now.
Right.
And I think looking back, that's one thing that if I were to do it all again, I think I would still join the team, still join the sorority, but really just remind myself, like, I think there was like 1,000 girls in my sorority.
Wow.
If you don't like the girls that are deciding to be popular, or even if you don't like the girls on your freshman floor that, you know, are trying to still grasp at this, I was the most popular person. It's a big fish in a small pond now. And now you're the small fish in the big pond. Go meet some new people.
That's a very important thing you're mentioning.
Yeah, I was very stuck on, like, they're popular, I should hang out with them. It's like, no, there's no popular in college anymore. Like, yes, in certain circles there will always be. But if you don't like it, go do something else, which I wish I could do over again.
And then like when you talk to people that are just from different places, it's kind of cool. I mean, did you ever end up I mean, obviously your experiences were kind of crazy for your last 2 years of college, but did you make friends or like go to other people's homes like for a weekend or anything like that? Like, did you make friends with people that lived like outside of New York or somewhere near Delaware? Or like, did you kind of experience different cultures and stuff?
Yeah, so I got to make a lot of friends in Delaware. Obviously, it's their big state school, and I got to hang out with them and see what life was like there. And pretty much realized that it's not a state I want to live in, but it's very fun to hang out in. A lot of people from Jersey, and then people from like Boston, North Carolina. I got to visit those and like realize that the big city in Boston isn't as bad as I think it was or thought it was. And then there would always be the one random friend that you make who's like, "Oh, I'm from California." And you're looking at them and you're like, "And you came all the way here?"
Yeah, that's wild.
I'm like, "Okay."
All right. I don't get it, but sure.
I'm like, "All right." I'm like, "I would have stayed there, but fine."
That's fun to kind of meet people from different places. I guess what advice would you give parents? Maybe we could kind of swing to that. So like if because you went through it and you had stuff with your mom and then your dad kind of had a different perspective. What advice would you give to parents kind of supporting their kids through these major changes? I guess maybe in terms of like, when to back off, when to lean in, how to give the right support.
Yeah, I mean, I had very hands-off parents kind of my whole life. They were always very open with me, and I never really felt like under the microscope. And then obviously in high school, I had friends who had parents like that, and I had friends who had parents were very absent. And I got to see in college the different types of parents and how that affected a lot of my college friends. My freshman year roommate had a very under the microscope strict household. She came from a very small town in Massachusetts. And, it's always said like the stricter your parents are in high school, the more likely that person is to go crazy their first year of college, which she did. Which she absolutely did, but also rightfully so. You have this whole world open to you and it's crazy and you can do whatever you want. But then I also still had friends going through the 4 years that they were still under the microscope with their parents, even an hour, 2 hours away. So my biggest thing, I think I would tell parents, and I have no kids, so this is fully coming from a 24-year-old's point of view, but
you know what? It's just as justified because you lived it, right?
I lived it. You want to be there for the moments that they need you, but if they're not texting you and maybe not telling you everything, just take it as they're having a good time and hope that they're making the right decisions. I mean, I know there's always a fear of parents of, oh no, what if they're at a party and they drink too much? Or what if they're not making the right decisions? This is going to affect their career. 90% of the time, the decisions that they're making probably won't be that bad, I think. And just like trust your gut instinct as a parent. Like understand that you brought up kids that know they can come to you when they need you, and that this is part of the life as a parent where it's weird. It's like you're still in charge of them. You're still there if they need something. And especially if they go away, you're not there.
It's gotta be a weird feeling. I guess from the standpoint of like no news is good news. But like also,
yeah,
I guess like maybe there's a certain, do you think there's like a certain like unspoken rule with like roommates or like people that live in the same dorm, like where if something doesn't seem right, you might reach out to another friend's like parents or families if you're like something's up. If something was really jarring or alarming, if like the person seems depressed, they haven't left the dorm room, or like, do you feel like people take it upon themselves to like reach out to that person's parents?
I know a lot of people who have. I only had one instance with a roommate where I felt like I had to, and I did.
Like it's rare.
And it's very rare. Mostly because the only time the parents really ever meet is on move-in day.
Mm-hmm.
And then if they're there at the same time for parents' weekend, and if they visit at the same time, and then when you move out. My parents never got the contact info of my freshman year roommate or any of my roommates moving forward. I just don't think they felt like they needed to. But I also know parents that are now best friends because their daughters room together in college.
I was kind of thinking, it's funny because I didn't think of it from that perspective. I was kind of almost thinking of like sort of the other way around in the same mentality, the same light, but like almost like you know, as a parent, I'm kind of like thinking like, you know, you guys are cool. If you ever need me, no questions asked. You call me and I will show
like
up. Yeah.
the
Like,
share of like the make sure.
yes. Yeah. That kind of mentality.
That never really happened for me either, but I know instances where it did. Like I had this one friend, her roommate was diabetic and she just didn't feel like she was taking care of herself, which is a big ask, you know.
It is. Oh,
Coming
yeah,
from,
totally.
yeah, her roommate came from, she was an only child and she always had her parents there. God forbid, you know, a health issue came up and then you don't have it anymore and you're alone. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a big thing to deal with. And she did feel like she needed to reach out to this girl's parents and say, like, I think she either needs to come home for the weekend or you need to come talk to her. But those specific parents in that instance did make sure to give my friend who was the roommate, their phone number.
So like, yeah, I guess like maybe some sort of medical reasons or something like that. It seems like kind of a smart thing to do, right?
But I think that's like an extenuating circumstance.
Yeah. I guess it's also like the people, the dorm, what do they call them? It's like the RAs, whatever they are.
Yeah, you trust that. I feel like most parents trust that they'll do what they have to do.
Yeah.
Like for the most part, I don't know many people that had their roommates' parents' phone numbers.
Mm-hmm. It seems like almost like a violation of, yeah.
Yeah, there were instances where like, dude, you got to call your parents.
Right. Because it's also like the same regard too. Like sometimes, I mean, look, not everyone has had great roommate experiences. So sometimes like it's not always the best, you know, thought process for the people that, you know, the the trust factor maybe is in the wrong people.
Oh yeah. And like speaking of roommate experiences, if I have to give any advice, and I tell this to anyone I know going to college,
listen up, everybody.
Don't room with your childhood best friend. I've seen it turn out really, really bad. I have seen it turn out good, but for the most part, it usually ends bad, especially if it's someone that you already spend a good chunk of your time with. You don't want to live with them too. I mean, it's almost like getting married.
That's a
and, like,
really
moving in
good
with someone
point. Like I'm sure
Yeah,
the expectation is
I mean,
always there, right? Of like, let's do something together. Oh, let's not hang out with those people. It's just you and me.
yeah, and it's also like drawing back the curtain on someone. Like when you think about it, when you hang out with your friend and go over their house in high school, their parents might be making sure their room is clean and like they have time to tidy up. It's like pulling back that curtain of like, oh, this is how you live.
Right.
And it's like almost an invasion of privacy being in a room that's small.
It is. It's really small.
So there's a game to picking your roommate, especially freshman year, because you're in that small room. I mean, as I moved out and moved off campus and got to an apartment and then a house, you get more privacy and more privacy. And it becomes more of just like regular roommate things, like do you keep the common areas clean? But when you're in that small confined space with them, it's like, okay, like I want to be friendly with you, but also I want to make sure that we're going to mesh well and that we won't trample over each other in the room and that we have the same like cleaning mentality, wake up mentality, and that we're not going to step on each other's toes.
That's like, that is, man, that is something else. Like, I wonder if like that is something that even is like people will hear it and believe it and understand it and process it. Cause like there are some baseline things that you really should learn how to clean before you go away to anywhere. And the idea of like just leaving crap all over the place is not going to fly when you're sharing a room that is like the smallest size bedroom with two people right near each other.
Yeah, and there's reasons why when you take every school usually makes you take like a roommate personality test,
Right.
even if you know exactly who you want to room with. And like you got to be honest with those questions. I knew when I was answering them, I was like, like maybe I'll say like I only want to go out like once a week, and then my mom would be like, "No, Carolyn, because if you say that and you get a girl who never wants to go out, and then you're coming back at 1 in the morning, you two aren't going to have a good relationship."
That's interesting. I mean, your mom sounded like she was so insightful in that way. Because,
Oh,
like,
she was so chill about the process and about being open. I mean, we went on a tour and she blatantly asked one of the tour guides, like, "What's the party life like here?" And the tour guide was like, well,
let me read the
we have a lot
company
of
line.
other
We are not permitted
we
to
have,
say.
yeah, we have a lot of other options, but it definitely helped having an honest person to talk to and like be a sounding board from. And I guess going back to that, like that's another uh thing I have to say to parents is like, as scary as it may seem to like be honest with your kids about what college is like, do it, because it's going to be the best way to prepare them for it and to make sure that they're set up the right way.
That's pretty smart. Would you say, like, like all, I guess I have like two more mini areas I kind of want to touch upon. One of them, I don't know if it's really something we would even know, but so I'm, based on different students' mentalities and like pushing themselves and taking honor classes and trying to fill up that, transcript with clubs and activities and sports and grades. Do you think all of those things were sort of important, or do you think like the focus of all those things got you to where you needed to be? Is there too much pressure on that, or do you think like you really have to kind of get focused and produce some degree of like a transcript or a version of yourself that shows you did a variety of things before applying to different colleges?
I personally don't think that all the APs that I took and all the college courses in high school made that big of a difference for me transcript wise. I was going to get the SAT score that I was going to get
Mm-hmm.
anyway, but I do think that it helped. Those higher rigor classes did set me up better for a higher potential in college to know how to study or just know what a high workload looks like. And obviously, they set me up a little bit better for the SAT, but at the same time, I was stressed out
Yeah.
in high school to the point where I would stay up to 3 in the morning to do my homework sometimes after sports, which just really isn't something that most people ever experience until
Right.
college, and that's probably because you're cramming. Um, I think there has to be, as with everything, a balance. Like understand that taking this one extra AP course is not going to be the reason that your kid becomes a doctor,
Right.
but
Exactly.
also taking one or two just to try it out, as long as that's good for your child, it's something they can do, will help prepare them to see what college is like.
In the safest way possible.
In the safest way possible without, taking 5 at once like I did and crying
Mm-hmm.
at night over my textbook. I don't think anyone should truly shed tears over a textbook until you're taking organic chemistry in
Right,
college.
right. That should be it. That should be the when you get Grey's Anatomy. That should be the that should be the
Yeah, that
factor
should be the
that
moment.
induces tears. Anatomy, physiology. That's crazy. All right, fun question time, because I have to ask, because it always comes down
Okay.
to food, and that's what it should all come down to. Did you feel like there were things that made like regional stuff special? Like, what was like your favorite food experience, or was there something about going away where you were that you were like, oh man, I've never had this before. This is good.
Oh my God, me and my friends talk about this all the time. The dining halls. If I could go back and just have the dining hall, and for granted, University of Delaware has an amazing dining hall compared to other colleges. I've heard horror stories about college food, but we had 3 different dining halls. And the one thing I want back so bad was they had this in the morning, every morning, an omelet station.
Oh,
And I
no
want
way.
it so bad. They had this giant circular griddle, and you would take this little like those water fountain paper cups in like the cone,
Right.
and you write what you wanted, and then you fill it with the toppings, and they make you an omelet with that in it.
Oh, that's amazing. It's like going to one of those
So
Mongolian grills, but like, yeah, it's an omelet station instead. That's really cool.
it was like being at a hotel, like a buffet every single day, which is why the freshman 10 is so real. But
Yes.
also just like you said, like learning like the geographical food, like we had pork roll
Oh, that's right. Oh, so you
from
had a
the
little bit of
Jersey,
the Jersey thing. I was just gonna say, yeah.
yeah, from the Jersey kids, and then we had scrapple from like the Pennsylvania, Delaware, Upper Delaware, which is just pretty much all the breakfast meat and all the bad foods, the pig and the cow that you can think of together, grilled up, which tastes
I
amazing.
was just gonna say, what's not to like there? That just needs to go with a bowl, like a bowl of grits, and you're probably ready to rock.
Yeah. And then there's always like the restaurants. Like, so for Main Street, we had great restaurants that when I went back for alumni weekend, it's like, okay, I'm going to go to Kate's and get the nachos. I'm going to go to El Diablo and get like a bowl. That those tastes bring me straight back to college.
Do you think like those things, like that part of it, like that going out and exploring food and things like that, has kind of set you up to like when you're in a new place to like do that, like to seek out what's good, what are the locals eating, like what do I want to try?
Yeah, of course, because like you hear about it when you're a freshman, like, oh, you have to go here, you have to go here. And of course, the restaurants have like special nights where they're trying to get new people in. And
Yes.
it, I was never a fearful foodie, where I was afraid to try things. But I think if I was, it definitely would have been a big turning point as like, okay, you can't really cook in your dorm anymore. And like I knew some people that basically lived off ramen
Right.
because they're picky. Yeah, because they're picky eaters, but it does force you to try new things.
It's a weird feeling of like
And
going and like taking your own money, or maybe if your parents help you out a little bit, but like either way, like the idea of like
yeah,
getting in a car, going to a restaurant, and then you're splitting the bill with other 18-year-olds or whatever
mhm.
else, you know?
And also learning like, okay, we should probably look at the Yelp reviews before we go here.
Right.
And that sometimes also it can look like a hole in the wall, but it's the best food you're ever going to eat in your entire life.
Yeah, because like when we grew up, like I don't think my sister and I had, you know, obviously she's 4 years older. She went to college before I did. I don't think we had like a huge or really much of an input when it came time to like going out to eat. It was kind of like wherever my parents decided. So like the freeing weird experience of like, oh, you could choose. You're like, you could go where you want. Was awesome. And I don't even know if I told the story in this podcast, but when I first went to college, my roommate was, you know, you're assigned like, you know, just however it works out. So my roommate was in some it was international business or something program. So he was away part of his freshman year. When he came back, because like the dorm situation, he had to go back to dorm life, and I had a sophomore roommate. So like that was like a little bit of a struggle to begin with. But when, you know, the first couple weeks we were there, he's like, all right, we're going to have you ever been out for barbecue? I'm like, all right, no, but let's do this. And we drove down this like dirt path, and it was this restaurant we were going to called Just More Barbecue. And I'm like, what is happening? So we're doing like a dirt path, driving to like through a cornfield. I'm like, where are they taking me? What's going to happen? Do I need to call home? And we turn this down this dirt road, even off the dirt road. It's like, where the hell are we going? And we show up in this like field, and there is this restaurant, and it's like in the middle of this like nowhere area. And on the sign is Just More Barbecue. I'm like, what is happening? And they're like, well, Just Barbecue is in Clemson. You got to go out of town to go to Just More Barbecue. And I'm like, what is Just More Barbecue? And like, you'll see. So you walk in, and there is like a cafeteria style thing where like women are behind the counter, and they're like serving you, like you pay for the food, whatever else. And there's like, you know, barbecue and ribs and, you know, pork and grits and hush puppies and everything else. And there is like a bluegrass band playing, and the bluegrass band was the Just More part. So like you would go, and it was this surreal experience. And I remember I'm like, oh my God, I'm like 18 years old and I'm going to this place, and I would never have done this if I wasn't here. And it was this moment that was just like this crazy juxtaposition of like, this is a different life. Like this is my life now. I'm going to places, you know? And I don't think people like that's I think the thing about going away that is really expensive, but so special, besides doing your laundry and dealing with things and getting a bad cold and being on your own and like whatever. But like the experiences of like going out and doing things like that, or like you can't replicate that.
Oh yeah, like I went to my first ever NFL football game because Delaware loves Philadelphia
That's so
and they
cool.
love the Eagles. So that too, I'm like, like 19 years old, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm in a football stadium. And I'm like, I never would have done this if I didn't go away.
I love this. So if Carolyn was about to go to college right now, you were going to give her a little letter to yourself, or a little post-it note to yourself, to your younger self. Is there anything that you would have told yourself then that, that now that is like, hey, younger self, here's what you should know?
Oh, a post-it note and a dream. Oh my God, I feel like my younger self, if they heard me say this, they would like roll over and die. But like the saying that everyone says, like 4 years isn't enough, is so true. So
Yeah.
like, I think I would tell myself like all the experiences, like good and bad, like take them in, because it's really not enough. And it really is the 4 years that I think shapes a lot of people into the person they're going to be, and just enjoy it. I got caught up, and I think being a girl too, like, again, getting caught up with like who's popular and who's not popular, like something that you don't have to worry about, and don't worry about people liking you or failing one thing, because again, it's 4 years that you have to change everything around and make new friends.
I love that. And I think like you bring up such a great point, and I'm just going to piggyback on that, because I think like, I don't remember who told me this. I think it was somebody I work with, but there was this idea of like, just be a free agent. You don't need to totally be with the same people every second. You could have friends all over the place, and you don't have to do the same thing with everyone all the time. And I love that. Like, take the experiences. You know what? I don't need to paraphrase what you said. You just said it. It was great. So
It was great.
I think this is awesome. Thank you, Carolyn. I think this was a really cool conversation. I think this gives like a lot of people a better perspective on like, maybe letting a couple things go, how to maybe have a belief system as a parent on sort of like finding that balance, and, the less news is good news to a certain extent, and, kind of knowing your kid maybe when to check in, and just sort of have some faith, and always know that the dining hall is the best thing ever made, with a history of food.
Oh, the dining hall,
especially the
really
wall of breakfast cereal. My God. But this is cool.
Yes.
So I think we may, maybe we'll have a follow up at some point with Carolyn, and maybe some people just talk about college in general and that sort of thing. But so I want to thank Carolyn for coming on the show, and we're going to switch back over to the rest of the podcast. So, all right, Carolyn, thank you so much, and have an awesome night.
You too.
All right, so we're back now. I want to thank Carolyn for taking the time to interview with us. I think it was kind of eye-opening, and maybe gave some perspective for parents of children that are approaching college or in college, or even if it's a long ways down the road. It's something kind of cool to think about and talk about. The question this week is, what advice or takeaways would you give someone entering college? We'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to answer this question, have comments, questions for the show, you can get in touch with us in one of three ways. You can leave a message on our Hey the Parents voicemail line at 559-537-5437 or 559-LAKE-KIDS. You can email the show at heytheparents@gmail.com, or check the show notes for socials. I think we're just about out of time in this episode. It's been a lot of fun sitting down and thinking about what it's like in the college years. So I hope that you've been enjoying these past few episodes where we've been doing some interviews, kind of mixing it up a little bit. We'd like to take a special moment to thank our listeners and supporters for donating to the show. If you want to help support this show so we can keep making episodes like this one, we have a link to donate in the show notes. If you don't have the means to do so, we really appreciate it when you tell your friends and family about this podcast so we can reach more listeners. Maybe we can learn from them, they can learn from us in this growing community. If you get a chance, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We can't wait to explore this parenting thing again with you next week on Hey the Parents, because every week it's an honest discussion about raising kids. Don't forget to hug your kids and charge those Chromebooks. That's new for me, for Sarah, and for Mike. We'll see you next time. Hey the Parents is produced by Mike Levine, Sarah Desravines, and me, Michael Height. I edit and mix our show. Our intro voice recording was done by the one and only Coltrane. If you like our show, we hope that you will consider going to the show notes and help support the podcast. Check the notes for social media information and contacts, and we look forward to seeing you next time. That was awesome. It actually worked out with the phone. That wasn't so bad.
Oh my God, that's so fun.
That was cool.
Like looking to the wall.
I know, it was funny.
Like,
I didn't know where to look because like you couldn't see
and
me.
I'm like, No, and I'm like, he's not here.
I know, isn't that funny? Because like in my head,
I can like perfectly picture you,
Yes,
but I'm
yes.
also like, you're not here.
I know, isn't that funny?